Brigitte Macron. Cool. We kind of have a laugh about it, run it different ways. Are we going to expect something else to be delivered to my door? Another threat, implicit threat from the Macrons, somebody calling in a favor, who knows, whatever. Anyways, we do dinner, and I am kind of feeling bad about...
On Candace Owens' explosive podcast episode, she reveals a shocking White House directive demanding she stop talking about Emmanuel Macron's wife, threatening to stall peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. Host Candace herself was contacted by a high-up White House source, and later by President Trump. This story exposes political power, censorship, and scandal at the highest levels. Let's break this down.
My pregnant attitude on the phone call, because I was, 8 weeks away from birth, and I was a bit shorter on the phone than I would have been if there wasn't like a growing infant foot that's lodged under my lung. And this person has been very good to me in the past. And so I resolved that before I go to bed, I'll phone him back and have a much more calm conversation. Not that I was rude, but just like, hey, what's this actually about? And so I did. And not only that, before I called this individual back, when I checked online, I realized that Emmanuel Macron is in Washington, D.C., February 24th. He is in Washington, D.C., and he had departed the White House just hours before I received the call. So anyways, I am in awe. A lot of thoughts are running through my mind. What could this possibly be about? And when I call that person back, they tell me something that is even stranger. They say, look, I again am the messenger here. What I was told from somebody that's pretty high up at the White House is that Emmanuel Macron is holding up negotiations to end the Russian and Ukrainian war unless you stop speaking about his wife.
The demand to silence a podcaster as a precondition to international peace talks exposes a terrifying abuse of power-free speech traded off for political expediency.
I'm just going, what? What are you saying? What are we even speaking about? What do you mean negotiations between Russia and Ukraine? I'm just like, looking into a story at my house. I've got a very small team here, and you're telling me that somehow negotiations are being held up and it needs to be communicated to me that I got to stop talking about Brigitte? What are we saying? And then I'm asking myself in my mind, because I hang up this phone and I am in true shock. Did Emmanuel Macron pretend to fly into D.C. under the guise of negotiations, the Russia and Ukraine war, and then instruct someone on his entourage to have an off-the-books discussion, a little meeting on the side, maybe somebody, again, like a Susie Wiles, where he made his truer demands? Like, hey, this is for the pictures. Me and Trump are talking about you. We're going to get it done. And then what really goes on behind the scenes is like, we're not doing anything until that little podcaster, Candace, agrees to shut her mouth. What? This is crazy. This is absolutely insane, okay? So we ended the conversation. I say, I'm going to sleep on this. It's a lot to process. I remember I get into bed and I just turn to my husband and I say, no one will ever believe us. Just something that just arrived at me very suddenly. I said, no one will ever believe that this just took place. And my husband's like, yeah, no, this is just very, very strange. And I promised the individual that I would pray on it, that I would think further about the situation. What are the implications here? And I then call him back the next day and I say, look, this is pretty weird. You have to admit this is pretty weird. And you're not really giving me any details. And I kind of want to know who specifically you spoke to, because I think it kind of matters. Is somebody trying to do a side deal while Trump is doing a different deal? And at that moment, he's honest and he says, no, President Trump was on the phone too. And I go, oh, are you kidding me? You didn't tell me this yesterday? That there was some sort of a conference call and President Trump is on the line and you didn't mention it? I go, did you lie to me yesterday? Were you trying to pretend that it was like a third party person? And he says, no, I didn't lie to you. Like, I got a phone call and I obviously in the background, Trump communicated something to me. So he was there when the phone call took place. And I'm going, what the heck is going on? Literally, what is happening right now? So I got the phone with him and I just say, I just need time to process what you're saying. This is so absurd. How could this become an issue that is involving the president of the United States? I'm doing a series on my podcast. And then I just kind of get into mommy mode because it's Tuesday. My daughter's got ballet. I'm at ballet with my daughter, and I get a text message from that person that says, you need to pick up the phone. Somebody from the White House is calling you. And I say, okay, it happened so quickly. I pick up the phone, and sure enough, it is somebody at the White House that is calling me. It's not Donald Trump, but it's somebody at the White House that is calling me. That's pretty high up, close proximity to Trump. I'm not going to name. And this person just, I assume, has never even watched 1 minute of my content because, I mean, if there were a guide to how not to approach Candace Owens when you are trying to get something done, he was just following this guide. He could not have been more pompous and more arrogant on the phone. And I would like to contextualize that I'm like pretty heavily pregnant. So like, you know, my bandwidth for BS or anybody trying to like, well, you know, it was very low. And he essentially says, look, you should do it because it's the president and he's asking you to do it. What else do you want me to say? Just do it. Just stop talking about Brigitte Macron.
Proximity to power breeds arrogance. A White House official unapologetically issues orders to shut down speech, openly dismissing constitutional rights like freedom of speech as irrelevant.
Astounding. Reflecting on that level of arrogance because he told you to do it. It's an order, so you should do it. And all I was thinking in my mind before I flew into, a little rage was that expression. Proximity to power can lead others to diluting that they wield it. You're close to power. You think you're now Trump. You're calling me, even if you were Trump, this wouldn't be the way to speak to me. And you're calling me like that's an order from the president of the United States. So you just do it. No questions asked. Don't even think about freedom of speech. Who cares about that pesky little First Amendment? You got to just do it now. And I just basically say, look, my daughter's crying because she doesn't like when I step out of ballet, even though she can see me. She's, please, mommy, come back in. You're speaking to me inappropriately. And I just say, I don't really care I don't know who you think you're speaking to, but this is not how you're going to get anything done with me. And I just hang up the phone. I'm like, this is just not a good conversation. I don't want to be part of this anymore. Goodbye. I don't like that at all. And the third party person who had initially told me about the situation is trying to calm down, and he calls behind. He's like, no, I don't know why you're spoken to like that. And like, this is still really important. And this really matters to the president, and he's kind of trying to talk me off the pregnancy cliff. And I'm still calm enough that I know that pregnant Candace is not always the most rational Candace and a little bit of a hothead. And I resolve, as I'm speaking to this situation with my husband, that I should also reach out and maybe call someone who's potentially been in a predicament like this. I don't know, someone who's got a larger audience than me, and kind of call in a favor because I don't normally text him, but I did reach out to Tucker Carlson. And I just kind of told him the situation and was like, look, this is really weird. I know I don't normally contact you for advice, but I could really use some advice right now because you know how much free speech matters to me and basically how important this particular story is to me because it involves, potentially, not just potentially, like pedophilia, incest, all of these elements. And as a mother, the idea that people this powerful, that the story could be covered it matters. Like this actually, the truth just matters at the end of the day. But also, like, if I could end the Ukrainian and Russian war, and by just stopping this conversation, I would do it. And he comes back with just very sage Tucker Carlson advice. And he says, look, you don't want to have the bloodshed of Christians on your conscience, but also free speech does matter. And you should essentially say you'll do it until, like you're saying, this negotiations are happening now and you'll agree to do that. But at some point, obviously, you need to inform people about what happened because this is totally crazy. And I say that's actually a very good idea. I feel like that's a very principled position to take. Anyways, I sleep on that. Anger is subsiding. Wake up the next morning. It's February 26th, and I am sitting in the makeup chair, and I get another message that's like, hey, keep your phone on. And I'm going, I really don't want to speak to this advisor anymore. I really don't. Where our personalities are not meshing. And anyways, this phone call is coming from Florida. I pick up the phone, and lo and behold, so here's what happened. I'm negotiating this thing. I'm negotiating Ukraine and Russia, and you wouldn't believe how many parts are part. It is President Donald J. Trump. He is calling me, and in true President Trump fashion, he jumps right into the narrative. We're not, hey, how you doing? He just like jumps right into the narrative of exactly how this went down. I am literally, it is hard to catch my breath to comprehend that 4 days ago, I'm ending a series about Brigitte Macron, and now I'm speaking to the President of the United States, and the topic of conversation, no matter which way you want to slice it, it's about Macron's wife's penis. I mean, there's no other way to say it, right? And so he just jumps right into the narrative. He's like, I'm negotiating. You wouldn't believe how many pieces this person wants this person, and this person wants this, and you have no idea how much is involved when you're trying to get one of these deals done, Anyways, I have Macron. I like Macron. We're speaking at the White House, and I'm walking him to his car. And, he says to me, Mr. President, can I speak to you for a second? I say, of course you can speak to me about anything. What's going on? And he tells me that there's Secret Service all around them. There's SUVs. They're encircled. And Macron wants to have a little sidebar. And then Macron says to him, Mr. President, do you know Candace Owens? And I say, Yes, of course I know Candace Owens. What's going on? And then the president says to me, you must be a very powerful person, Candace. We're talking about the president of France taking me aside to talk about your podcast. And then he continues his narrative, and he tells me that Emmanuel Macron is requesting to his face that I stop speaking about his wife. And one of the things Trump said is like, he tells me, she's old, and this is really, really impacting her. And I'm listening, and he's, in one of Trump monologues, he's very funny. And then he said, I saw her, Candace, I saw her up close, and she looks like a woman to me. I had dinner with her at the top of the Eiffel Tower. And I explained to him that she has had this amazing doctor who specializes in transgenderism surgeries or feminization procedures. I'm talking to the President of the United States about this, guys. This is crazy. This is wacky. But I'm just giving it as good as I get. I'm just trying to get him to understand the truth. And then I explained to him why I don't feel so great about this request, because that's the more important part. Like, you are requesting that I really, and despite your reasoning, which is very sound, that I stop telling the truth. And I said to Trump, and I will be honest, that at that moment I realized that one day this is going to go into my autobiography. And so I got to say something funny. And I said to him, respectfully, Mr. President, it's not my fault that he married someone with a penis. He then tells me, we're really close to getting this thing done. He tells me again, Macron's been really good to me. He's been very easy to work with us. He's been a good person. He just wants me to get this one thing done. And he throws in the art of the deal type stuff. He starts complimenting me. He said, Melania loves you. She says you're so beautiful. She thinks you're so beautiful. I said, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. Compliments will get you everywhere in life is my mentality here. And then I say to him what I've agreed to already in the back of my head. I say, look, I'm happy to do this for the short. Obviously, I don't want to have on my conscience that less Christian men could have died in the East if I just shut up about something. But I'm very clear to him that this is going to be short term, and that I fully expect that in a few months I will be able to speak about this. And this is the point of the conversation where it actually gets quite interesting, because he says yes, and I am now adding to you what I sensed. Like, he was about to commit to that, but then it felt to me like someone in the background was like, no, we need this conversation to stop altogether. And then he doesn't say no or yes, but he just says, that he really needs to work with Macron long term, and they have this long working relationship. And I was very clear, this is not long term for me. Like, if you're close to this deal, ink it, let's get it done. And then he sort of offers at the end, he says, hey, maybe I can come on your podcast one day. I'm great for ratings. They're so Trumpian to give yourself a compliment. So I give him the Trump right back. And I say respectfully, Mr. President, I'm apparently good for ratings too, because you've got a leader of a country, the president of the country, asking you to ask me to do a favor. So, Then we end the conversation, and I am just reeling. I can't believe it's even happened. I then go and I immediately tell my husband, and I write down the details of the conversation so that I wouldn't forget the conversation that we were having. And of course, the first thing that I want to say principally is that Emmanuel Macron must step down. Okay? Because if that is true, and I will say that did not come from Trump. He did not say specifically he's holding up negotiations for this, but he did say specifically that they were talking about the Ukraine and Russia war all day, and he's just trying to make it all happen. And that is when Macron took him to the side. So I kind of trust the information who came from that third party person, that what he was being told was that he was holding this up, right? Like Macron's holding this up, a contingency here on whether or not he's going to agree to this sort of international deal is whether or not Candace Owens stops speaking about his wife. Yet you got to step down. Okay, because there is no greater example of just the lack of morality that a leader can have than his husband, wife putting him on a plane and sending him overseas to make Candace Owens stop speaking about their relationship. That is
a political leader willing to jeopardize peace negotiations over a personal vendetta reveals a moral bankruptcy that demands accountability and impeachment.
It's like we really all should just take a deep breath here, take a step back and recognize that he is willing to let bloodshed. He's willing to let people die. Okay. And a holdup here is going to be whether or not Candace Owens stops speaking about his wife's penis. That's ridiculous. You are not qualified to hold office. I thought that before all of this, just looking into your background. I know you're a fraud. You know you're a fraud. Your wife certainly knows that you are a fraud. But this is reaching levels where you just have to be impeached. That's absurd. That is like, let's get the impeachment trials going. And in my head, I'm thinking to Trump, actually, if you wanted to really negotiate, you could have said to him, how about I go live and tell all those reporters what you just said if you don't sign this document? That's how I would have played it. But, you know, I was like 7 months pregnant. I would have played hardball. I don't need to have friends when we're talking about ending bloodshed. But the second thing that I want to say here is that it's occurred to me over time that this is about much more than the Ukrainian and Russian war, right? That is not why Mr. Macron put him on a plane to go speak to Trump in person about this issue.
Candace Owens details a surreal political drama where a podcaster's investigation into Macron's wife supposedly threatens global peace, prompting a direct White House warning and even a call from President Trump himself. This unprecedented intersection of free speech, international diplomacy, and personal scandal lays bare the dangerous lengths elites will go to control the narrative. It's a story about power, censorship, and the cost of truth. Drop your take below. What's your verdict on this tangled web?